welcome back to Skeptics and Seekers. I'm one of your hosts, Dale, representing the Christian or Seeker side.
And I'm the other guy, David, representing the skeptic.
Okay, so we're a bit pressed for time. David has some personal business to attend to. So we're going to get straight into the show today. No announcements or anything like that. So this is a show. This is my topic. I'm doing it for one of our listeners, Arthur, who is interested in the doctrine of creation out of nothing, or creatio ex nihilo. So I wanted to do a topic about that and just sort of explore what does this mean, creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. So I think that the Bible teaches that this doctrine is in fact true in both the book of Genesis as well as in the New Testament. So I wanted to approach this philosophically. What does it mean for God to create out of nothing? And he's basically, this just means that he doesn't create out of any pre-existing materials. Creation was an act ex nihilo through God's power. Only God existed before. So there was no material cause. God functioned as the efficient cause for that. Moving on. So God also sustains the universe in existence. So what does that mean? There are different views of this. Some people believe that God continuously creates. This is a view sometimes called occasionalism. And I argue that that's wrong as well. Basically, what God does is he conserves creation in existence. So it sustains, or the Bible in Colossians or Ephesians says that God holds all things together, or he consists. The universe consists with God. So it's preserved throughout change, throughout time, and that sort of thing. So one point to note is that when God creates, so creation and conserving are two different types of acts. They stand in different relations to God, and I think I'll skip. I was going to say, what does it mean for something to come into existence? But I'll leave that. That's in the blog, and I'll get into that in more detail in the cosmological argument. Basically, God actualizes as the efficient cause. He actualizes from within himself a potentiality and brings it into existence, into the exemplification relation. Now, another thing to put here is what's God's relationship to creation in terms of time? Now, I assumed in the blog that an A theory of time is true about the universe, about creation. And given that, I said, well, does that have any implications for God's temporal nature, or his mode of eternality? Is he timeless or temporal? And I gave one argument based on relations. So another argument for that is that based on knowledge. But basically, God stands in extrinsic relations to creation. We depend on God for our existence as the sustainer of our existence. And the Bible speaks of him as having dynamic relations with people in time, on earth. Given that relations angle, I think it's pretty clear that God can't be timeless. He must be temporal, because he's constantly coming into new relations with real relations with creation and with people in creation, for example. The other argument that I didn't include in my blog, but it's another one, is the knowledge argument. And basically there are changing propositions, like today is Saturday, December 14th. And in order for God to be omniscient, he would have to know that propositional truth. Because an omniscient God knows all propositional truths. So if God were timeless, it's logically impossible for him to know that truth, and therefore there would be propositional truths that God doesn't know, and he would not be omniscient. The final thing is, okay, so God as a sovereign ruler, the issue of divine providence. So everybody knows, basically there are mixed scriptures on this. Okay, 6 minutes. There are mixed scriptures on this. So some verses speak about God being sovereign and owner and ruler of all things. He's the author of everything that happens. There's this strong sense of sovereignty. He elects people to accomplish his ends and stuff like that. But on the same side, there are countless Bible verses that talk about God repenting and things happening that aren't what he willed to have happen. He wants us all to be saved. He doesn't want anyone to be a depraved sinner and to go to hell. But this implies God pleads for this to happen. He also tests people, or we're considered morally blameworthy or praiseworthy based on our choices. So the Bible has seemingly paradoxical verses, and the way we make sense of that is Molinism. So I'm going to try to get this done in 3 minutes or less. So Molinism basically is the doctrine that God has three types of knowledge. He has, in the first place, natural knowledge. So that's essential to what God is. God has that whether he creates or not. And he has natural knowledge of all logical possibilities, strict logical possibilities, what could or couldn't happen, including what people can and can't do and that sort of thing in relation to salvation or whatever their choices and that. Then we come to God's middle knowledge, and that's where the Molinism bit comes in. It means God has middle knowledge. So God has knowledge of all feasible possible worlds, what people will freely choose to do or not do in any set of given circumstances. So what they would or wouldn't do. And it's based on this knowledge that God chooses a world to create, to actualize through his divine will. And once he does create that through his divine decree, then he gains free knowledge. So once he chooses to create this world, he then gains knowledge that Dale and David will do a podcast on December 14th, 2019. Those are the three forms of knowledge. And obviously, the middle knowledge part is what's important, given that humans have free will and that sort of thing, in terms of divine providence. Perfect. That's it. And I finished early, so I'll turn it over to David now.
Okay, so I am going to bypass my opening speech. I apologize to anyone who feels like I have let them down this week. I will give you, however, instead of my opening speech, a set of excuses. And so you can take those for what you will. Excuse number one, a thing came up personally, and I'm just going to have to deal with it. So this podcast is going to have to, of necessity, be a little bit short today, and I wasn't expecting that. Came up just before the podcast, so apologies.
It's good. It's good. It actually gives me more time because I'm making up a massive miracle thing for you.
Yeah. So I'm not done with my excuses. The second excuse is the massive miracle thing. It has simply eaten up almost all of my spare cycles this week, and so it's left me precious little time to prepare for this very deeply heady topic. And so I'm not sorry about that, because I actually care about the miracle subject quite a bit. And if you do not have it yet, you can download my ebook for easier reading. It is simply put in the format of an ebook so that you can read it easily on a smartphone or a tablet or a Kindle or whatever you've got there. It's over 6,000 words, 6,600 words, and so it'll take a little while. It's like a long chapter. Just treat it like that. But I wanted it up early so that you would have time to dig into it before the show. Dale does not have a similar product up because he has not, as far as I know, completed his post. Also, he has no idea how to do any book. I'm guessing. So
No.
he has not submitted anything to me to put that way. But if he does that, I will also put that in a bookable format, so that can also be downloaded from Reason Press as well. We'll also put the link to the ebook in the show notes today for anyone who doesn't have it. So the third excuse is I just find it hard to care about this subject as much as some other subjects as a skeptic.
Really?
Yeah, it is, because some subjects, and it's part of the Christian bubble, skeptic bubble. Christians think some things are important that skeptics simply don't, and they don't understand why someone else wouldn't think that's so important. And skeptics don't understand why someone would think that is important. So we have our various bubbles.
Just so I know, because this was a topic. Number one, I asked you in advance, and you said you were interested.
Let me finish.
Okay.
So in the sense, in one sense, it's a little bit like asking a skeptic, what color shirt would God be wearing on Tuesday? You can actually have a very interesting conversation about that, I'm sure. But since we don't believe in your God, and you probably don't believe that he wears shirts, it's strictly an intellectual exercise. And so, ex nihilo, ex materia. Look, I don't believe in your God, and I don't believe in any version of creation. I don't believe in any version of creation, so it doesn't matter. I mean, what the Christian has is, well, the book says this. Well, I don't care what your book says. I don't actually go to the Bible for scientific insight. It's a little bit like a Ken Ham saying, yeah, but the Bible says it was created in 6 days. I don't care, Ken Ham. That's not where I go to look for information about this. And even though I guess this is turning into a little bit of an opening argument, I'll just dig into one of the passages that I quoted here. It's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3. It's the faith chapter. And it says, by faith we understand that the worlds were set in order at God's command, so that the visible has its origin in the invisible. You know what? Take the B part of that passage out. You can end with the first two words, or first four words. By faith we understand. Well, screw that. I don't care. I don't understand scientific propositions by faith. That is not, in fact, a reliable form of epistemology as far as I'm concerned. And that is really the entirety of this topic as far as I'm concerned. So it really is hard to care about it as much as maybe some other topics. It just doesn't have the kind of practical application that a practicalist like me requires. That said, if I've got to take on this topic, I would say ex nihilo is incoherent. I don't think it makes any sense even philosophically. I would say that it is presuppositional, and therefore not even possible to argue. I don't argue with presuppositionalists for a reason. If you want to just look at some of the classic presuppositionalists out there, look up their debates, and you will understand why nobody who is not a presuppositionalist would argue with a presuppositionalist. And this is a topic that I think is inherently presuppositionalist in nature. And then the third thing, if I do have to get into the theology and what the Bible says or doesn't say, I don't even think the Bible supports ex nihilo. It might be consistent with ex nihilo, but that's not a necessary conclusion from the biblical text. So I think the most charitable thing I can say about the biblical text is that it's underdetermined. And so and I do think that, in some places it makes more sense to have an ex materia point of view. So these are the three things. Ex materia, by the way, ex nihilo, you see us throwing these around. Creatio ex nihilo just means it was made out of nothing, poof. Creatio ex materia means that it was created from existing material. So with that, let the questioning begin.
Okay, so David, so your first one is it's incoherent. The second is the Bible doesn't teach it. What was your third argument against it again?
Yeah, it's that it's presuppositional. I think it's it's unfalsifiable, and also I think it's a thing that Christians believe because they have to believe it.
Okay.
It's not a thing that they believe because they actually think that's what the text says, or rather, they actually think that's what the text says because the rest of their theology depends on it. Now, I want to challenge that, by the way. If you're a Christian who thinks that ex nihilo is necessary for your theology, there are plenty of Christians who do not believe in ex nihilo who are still Christians. They just have a slightly different version of their theology that makes it work. So I would say that it's not necessary, but I think that most Christians think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's what you mean. So taking the last one first, so unfalsifiable, you mean in terms of falsifying one's faith, not in terms of we can falsify the creatio ex nihilo is true or not.
Well, no. So what I'm saying is unfalsifiable is you can't falsify what the Bible is actually saying about it. It's too underdetermined to say that the Bible is yeah. So these things, well, so they kind of blend together a little bit, but there's no way to determine. And this is me being generous because I actually think the Bible is probably more on my side than yours. But I'm willing to say there's no way to fully determine what it means. And so if you just want to read ex nihilo in it, you can, and I can't make you not read it that way.
Okay, so I'll start with this. So in terms of unfalsifiable scientifically, creation out of nothing isn't actually. Modern science confirms and verifies that this is probably true. So I'll just say that on a secular standpoint, right? This is what the Kalam cosmological is all about, argument is all about. This is why the vast majority of scientists, even ones that believe the universe is eternal, believe that we can prove that it's more probable, like Lawrence Krauss. I'll just believe him. He's a hardcore atheist. He's biased. He makes money off of basically lying to people, but pretending that the universe is eternal. But yet even him, after all of his bias, will admit, yeah, based on the evidence, the best explanation, it's more probable than not that the universe began to exist. And the universe is defined as all of space and time.
But that doesn't. I think you were vastly mischaracterizing the scientific position. The scientific position is not ex nihilo, creation out of nothing. The best you can say about the scientific position is that some scientists believe that the universe had a beginning. And I think that if we talk about a beginning, even then we have to be careful about what scientists mean by that. So they're not saying that there was nothing and then there was this, but that this instantiation of space-time as we experience it today had a beginning of expansion, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't stuff there to expand. No. So you are not, in fact, characterizing it correctly by saying that scientists believe in creatio ex nihilo. That's not true.
No, you're the one that's mixed that up. What you're talking about is the eternal models. These are the ways they try to escape an absolute beginning for the universe. But Lawrence Krauss, even despite the fact that he doesn't believe this, admits that on the evidence, it's more probable than not that the universe, the standard Big Bang model with some tweaks, is true. And that means that's an absolute beginning of all of space and time and all of its contents. No quantum foam, nothing exists on the other side of that boundary on the standard Big Bang model. And that's what we're saying is the most probable given the evidence. It's actually confirmed.
So I'm not going to turn this into a scientific debate, but I think you're wrong in that this is an example of why you shouldn't take your science from Christians who are.
I'm getting it from
scientists.
Lawrence Krauss.
No, you're not. So I have probably read more Lawrence Krauss than you. And you are not getting it from Lawrence Krauss. You're getting a very misreading of Lawrence Krauss, and it's just not what Lawrence Krauss is saying. That said, I don't even think that this is where this particular debate has to live. So I will leave it to the audience to do your science homework.
Gotcha. Yep, fair enough. And this isn't a science thing, but I just wanted to say, so I am right about Krauss, and I've spoken to him personally. But forget about that. Okay, we disagree on what Lawrence Krauss is saying, and I admit you're right. Lawrence Krauss believes in an eternal cosmology. He doesn't believe in the standard Big Bang thing. Yes, you're right on that. But he does think I was just quoting him about. He says, on the evidence alone, without having a biased worldview, overriding worldview, or something like that, it's more probable. But the point
here, the Big Bang doesn't speak to creatio ex nihilo or ex materia, though. The Big Bang doesn't even address that issue.
It does.
It does
not. It takes away ex materia. There's no material without space and time and all of its contents. Right? Material includes energy and matter.
What theory of the Big Bang are you referring to that regresses the first moment to no matter? So I know of theories that regress the first moment that we can calculate to extremely compressed matter. But I haven't seen any models that say no matter and then some matter.
No matter and then some. Well, that's what the standard Big Bang model says.
Well, no, it doesn't. It does. It does. I do understand bang as in rapid expansion. But for rapid expansion to happen, there has to be something to rapidly expand.
Right.
That's the bang. The bang is not boom. There was nothing, and then there was something.
The standard Big Bang model, again, one of the tweaks with it is this includes, with the Alan Guth and Vilenkin theory, it includes the multiverse. So when I'm saying universe, that can include the multiverse, all of space and time and its contents, reduced down like a cone, reduced to that point. That's the boundary point. At that point, below that point, there is no matter. So you can't have ex materia to pop into existence and then inflationary expand and then expand at a less.
So once again, I can say this is not going to be a science podcast. I'm going to let it, but I will say that as far as Christians making science claims, so we on the Still Unbelievable response book team had Skydive Phil as one of our writers. Who questioned? I want to say who questioned Vilenkin on this point because this is a thing that Justin Brierley was saying in his book, and he was quoting the non-scientist William Lane Craig, who was misquoting Vilenkin, and we asked, and Vilenkin said, no, that's not right. And in fact, Vilenkin has told Craig this. Craig knows that, but he still continues to repeat the false assertion. And I'm not going to say that Craig is being disingenuous, but Craig knows that what he's saying about Vilenkin's theory is not Vilenkin's theory. And so there's a lot of science here to sort out, and I suggest that you should not only not take your science from the Bible, you should probably not take it from a couple of idiots like us.
Well, I know what I'm talking about here. And as for, so I'm not here to defend William Lane Craig. That entire email exchange and conversation between William Lane Craig and Vilenkin, his exact words, is available on the Reasonable Faith website. So if you check that, I think it's in the Q&A section. So you can check that out and read for your own self. Don't just listen to me or David. But yes, I get what David's saying, but it's not true that William Lane Craig is misrepresented him. But the point, David's argument is, he says it's unfalsifiable, and I'm saying, pretend I'm wrong. Let's pretend David's entirely right and ex materia can be true or something. I'll just concede that for the sake of argument. It's still falsifiable in a scientific way. We can adjudicate. Let's pretend one of these eternal cosmology models is true. Okay, well that would falsify creatio ex nihilo then, because we have eternal matter. and the universe comes out of the quantum foam. That's the boundary, as opposed to the point of a cone or something like that. So yeah, that's my point, is that it is falsifiable on a secular end. Now your first.
I don't think it's falsifiable yet. So it may be theoretically at some point one day, but the fact is, the only true answer is we don't know about the first moment of I will use this secularly, creation, and pretending that you do is just stating the case too far. You don't. We don't.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll let you have the last word on that one. Incoherent. So what is it about it that's incoherent for you? Like, do you understand? You understand what a material cause is, obviously, right? And do you understand what it means to be an efficient cause?
I'm gonna say no. This is one of those things that confuses me.
Okay, so an efficient cause, it just means it's the primary source of the change or that sort of thing. So, sort of like the artisan is the efficient cause of a bronze statue that they make. And the material cause would be the bronze of the statue, the stuff of which it's made.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Pretty straightforward, right? Like,
I suppose I would never say the bronze is a cause of a statue. The bronze is just the material, but it's not a cause in any way.
Well, it is, I guess.
If there's no, in the case of a statue, you can have all the bronze you want to in the world sitting around. It's not going to form itself into that specific statue. So
yeah, it's not
so in that sense, it's not a cause.
Well, it's not a complete cause. Like, none of them are complete. Without the bronze, an artist won't be able to create the statue either, right? So, like, these are just different aspects of causes that are.
I guess I don't. This is why it confuses me. I don't know why we're using the word cause in these ways. I understand that certain types of philosophers do use this, but I don't find it particularly useful.
Well, it's just terminology, though. Like, I think you're arguing semantics. I
will grant that it may be terminology. I mean, just jargon, if you will. I think it's somewhat unnecessary and confusing. But okay.
Yeah. So put it this way: forget about these outdated Aristotle. Maybe you don't like Aristotle's terms and stuff like that. Whatever. But the point is, we understand what it means for something to be made out of material.
Yes.
Okay. And we understand that substances, or in this case, God as an agent, is what provides the efficient means for the universe to come into being, just like the artist who shapes the bronze into a statue. The potentiality exists within the artist, and we're saying that it's the same with God. The potentiality for the universe becomes actualized through the agent, through God.
Okay, so if I understand your argument for ex nihilo, it's you have a potential cause without a material cause.
Correct. Yeah, there's no pre-existing material that exists.
Well, I find that incoherent.
So why would a material cause be necessary?
Because it's material. The statue is material. So if I want to create a statue out of bronze, I need bronze. And if God wants to create a universe out of matter and energy, he needs matter and energy. You haven't given me any reason why I should, plead special for God that he doesn't need matter and energy to make a matter and energy universe.
See, that's an assumption of skeptics. That's material. It's called a materialist causal principle, and that's a totally unproven and not true. I mean,
Okay,
it's
well, you use
obviously.
the. I'm sorry, you use the analogy. So tell me, as a sculptor, how I'm going to create a bronze statue without any bronze.
Well, in that example, you do need a material cause,
Okay.
but it's
Well,
not a
I'm sorry. Then I don't understand
causal
your
principle.
example. Then I don't know what you're getting
What
at.
you need is the potential, the potential, and the ability to actualize that potential. God has that within
Okay,
him.
I don't
He doesn't
understand.
need to be physical or
We
material.
all have the potential within us. I have the potential to fly, but I need an airplane. I have the potential to breathe, but I need air. So saying that God has the potential without material that's incoherent.
Well, no, it's coherent. You just gave an example. You are the efficient cause of you flying on an airplane. You have the potential and the ability.
Well, I'm
to
just trying to use
actualize.
your terminology that I'm learning from you today that I don't like. So maybe if I'm using it wrong, you can let me know if I'm using it wrong.
No, you're using it right,
Okay,
but you
that's
just
what I
proved
thought.
that
So
it's
my
coherent.
efficient cause is I want to fly, but I cannot fly without the material cause of the airplane. But you're saying that God can do it without the material cause, and I'm just trying to. I'm trying to figure out in what other circumstances can we skip the material cause and it be coherent. And if there is no other circumstance, and you say, but God can, then that sounds like special pleading.
So obviously, there's a strong enumerative inductive argument, because pretty much everything we can think of in creation has a material cause, right? Because the universe is material, it's physical, and physical substances and that sort of thing cause things. But there are obviously the standard Big Bang model is an example of creatio ex nihilo. Even forget about God and all that. The standard Big Bang model is coherent. Even people that don't believe it's true, pretend it's false, it's still coherent. And scientists understand the mathematics of that coherent idea. So it is possible for there to be a cause without it entailing a material cause. Obviously, I would also point to like free will or something like that, but you don't believe in a soul producing physical effects. But those are the only examples in creation that we could, or involving creation, that we can go to, is the beginning of creation, and or the soul providing standing in causal relations with the physical body or something like that. So again, that's
obviously
that's
I don't
coherent
believe
notion.
that, but once again, I'm still trying to get you to give me one coherently structured statement of how one's will then leads to an outcome that involves material without the material.
How one's will does, yeah,
Yes,
it does.
how the efficient cause gets to a material thing without a material cause. That's basically, this is just a fancier way of saying something from nothing.
Well, yeah, you're getting into the interaction problem, right? The mechanistics of how a spiritual substance
Mechanism
can-
matters here because something
No, it
is
doesn't.
well, but something is stuff, and nothing is no stuff. And if you're going to tell me that the something definitely came from the nothing, you've got to give me some kind of mechanism for that. And if you're telling me that God started with nothing except his desire for a thing, desire is not the same as material.
Okay, well, let's say this. So here's something. Thoughts. I am the efficient cause. There's no material. Thoughts aren't material. They're not physical. But I cause thoughts to exist all the time just by thinking them in my head. There we go. I'm just thinking about 1 + 1 = 2. So now that thought exists. It's non-physical, and I just caused that to exist. That had certain physical effects on my brain, and stuff like that. So
I would say that your brain is the physical cause of it, and if we took away your brain, we would take away that thought and the memory of that thought. But that's neither here nor there. I don't want to take away your brain.
are Are you? Yeah, but your thoughts are not identical to the physical states.
Again, kind of a science, metaphysical question that I don't necessarily want to get into on this podcast. I would say that if you want to equate this universe to God's thoughts and say that it is, a figment of God's imagination, then fine, I can go with that. It's perfectly coherent. But I would just say that this universe is not then made out of matter. It's just thoughts.
Yeah, so that's what idealists or people like Tarot would say, right? But I'm just
you're
saying
not an
that's
idealist.
not true. That's correct.
Right,
Yeah,
and neither am I.
It's not
so
true.
That's the only way that what you're saying can make sense to me.
No, but that's not true. Things undergo substantive changes and that sort of thing. You're just assuming that only a material cause can produce a material effect. That's just an assumption. You can't prove that true at all, and it's not coherent. We actually have scientific proof. Again, I'm not trying to get into it.
Okay, and I disagree. And I disagree with the things that you're calling scientific proof. So we can't actually make any headway on that.
But okay, so I know that you disagree with the standard Big Bang model that I gave, but is that coherent? Are you saying that's
I think I disagree with your interpretation of the standard Big Bang model. I would also, if I wanted to get into the science discussion, say you disagree with the special theory of relativity. You would deny that, but I would say that you don't understand the implications of it if you, with your A theory of time. We're not actually going to be talking about the A theory versus B theory of time either. But we can both make claims that the other simply doesn't understand the science. We are both probably at least half right. So yeah, I don't
forget it again. Pretend you were right and I'm wrong. But you would say the standard Big Bang model is coherent, though, right? Even if it's false, these scientists that made it up and stuff like that it's not incoherent, this model.
Yeah, I would say that my understanding of the standard Big Bang model has no bearing on the question of the original material state of things. So once again, this might be a hermeneutical question on how we interpret the standard model, and again, I don't want to go there.
Okay, well,
because we can't negotiate this issue unless we've got one or two or three scientists on a panel helping us navigate through it. So there's only so far that I'm willing to go. In fact, I'm not trying to push. I'm not trying to push it here. I was just trying to make okay. Well, I'll leave it at that. Just so you know, reader, if you've read the book Still Unbelievable, I was one of the people who not just wrote it, but I was one of the leads on that project. I actually didn't want to address any of Justin's science claims because Justin is not a scientist. He clearly can only quote other people who themselves are not scientists. And I thought that most of his science assertions were kind of silly, and that we did not need to step into the science arena to refute that. However, it was determined that Justin did bring it up, and if he's making some false statements about science, we should get some credible people involved to address it. But left to myself, I would have never addressed it. And I feel the same way about the subject on this podcast. There's only so much that I am willing to address. It's not that I haven't read any science, I'm unfamiliar with science. It's just that I don't want anything that I say to be taken as scientifically authoritative. And so in that realm, I just ask everyone to do their own homework.
Yeah, but so I'm not trying to trap you or get you wrapped up in the science discussion. I was just using, because you asked me for an example of a material effect coming about without a material cause, and there are only a handful of examples I can point to, because most of everything in the universe is already physical and is caused through material or physical things. So the best way, I know that you're obviously going to deny the existence of a soul and libertarian free will and all that stuff. So that's why
check.
Yeah, so the best thing to get to you is by appealing to the standard Big Bang model, which is a part of mainstream scientific, mainstream science. Even the atheists, even the ones that Skydive Phil interviewed, which I checked out his videos for my cosmological argument. I have looked into what the scientists say and that sort of thing for that show, and I will be quoting them and that sort of thing. So excellent. Skydive Phil's source is good. Check it out. Check out his sources and videos. Also check out William Lane Craig. Also check out the other scientists that back up William Lane Craig's thing. It's not just philosophers that believe this, but the point I was getting to is it's coherent. This is a coherent model. Forget about God. God doesn't exist. Secular scientists can say, yeah, it's coherent for a material effect to come into being or to come into existence without a material cause.
Okay, so
and this is the best way to get there.
Whatever you're thinking of as your definition of nothing here, and coming into being,
this is a good, yeah.
We know that we can have some variation on these things. Again, something I don't plan to get into. But whatever your definition of it is, and if you're saying, well, but we can see it in the natural world, then I would just say, okay, then we don't really need God as an explanation. So you can keep the ex nihilo part and get rid of the creation part. Because the creation part
you
speaks...
can separate them, yeah.
Right? I mean, I would just say that if you want to go that route, most Christians do not want to go that route, but if you want to go that route, you've just eliminated your need for God.
Well, so no, because and again, there are other aspects of the blog, so we're pressed for time. So this will be my last thing on this one. That's not the case. Sorry, say what you just said again, the last sentence.
So if you're going to say ex nihilo, that something can come from nothing, which, by the way, most Christians are shouting, no, something can't come from nothing. You can't give them that.
Right.
If you want to say that, great. Don't need your God. The universe can assemble without God. If you say, no, it needs God, then you're not actually talking about some kind of ex nihilo process at all. You're saying that God is a effective cause for a material end, and therefore this formula requires a material cause. That's the principle that the Kalam cosmological operates on. Ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing, nothing comes. And this is absolutely right. This is why atheists are absolutely lunatic to take the ex nihilo route, and why they're desperate to come up with some kind of eternal material out of which the universe comes. But as David just pointed out, that's not the case with Christians. We've got God, a causal agent with causal powers, potentiality, and the ability to actualize those potentials. So but God
there is no
more
violation
causal power than we are when it comes to creating matter.
So let me keep going, because remember we haven't even dealt with the Providence or the conservation stuff. So yeah, and it's almost
we still got a good 20 minutes. Let's do it.
Okay, so I'll just say it's not a violation of that fundamental principle.
And I'll just say it is.
Christian. But we have a causative agent, right? Atheists don't. Nothing isn't a kind of substance. So there is only God, right? Nothing is
I'm
no
sorry.
thing.
A magician is not a cause for the rabbit appearing in a hat. The magician is window dressing. To suggest that somehow at least we have a magician, you have simply failed to understand the failure of your argument.
Let me. So no, I got to get here, right? So in terms of material, that's obviously referring to physical. That's what creatio ex materia is, pre-existing physical material, and that's the rejection that Christians give. But if you want to say God's spiritual substance is the material, because there isn't like God and then nothing, as though they're like external things. There's only God. Nothing is no thing. So there's only God. So creation, that's why I said I can understand people who believe in creatio ex Deo, out of God, his substance and his ability to potentialize.
Right. And by the way, just so you know, I don't deal with creatio ex deo because it is just creatio ex materia to me. You're just talking about God's material. So I don't care what kind of material it is.
No, but the material cause refers to a particular type of material. Spiritual substance doesn't count as material traditionally. If you want to have your own definition where it expands and includes that, then potentially I can do that.
Yeah,
Another model is to deny that God...
Spiritual substance would be like energy to me. So matter, energy, conversion. If you want to say that God peeled off a piece of his dead skin and created a universe, I would go with you on that. I would say that that's coherent.
So that's a possible thing. The main thing here is God's got to cut. It's got to be intrinsic, and then it's like he cuts, so he gets like a growth, and then he cuts the tie, and now creation is external to God. There's God and there's creation.
Yep.
So that's a plausible model. Another model is
which I have no problem with philosophically.
Gotcha. Another model is the issue of thought. So this is sort of idealist, but you can tweak it to God's thoughts become tangible or something like that. So this would be a divine conceptualist model. Another way that the Bible authors would have done it, creation is like God's breath. When he speaks creation into existence, those words become concrete and physical in some way.
Believe it or not, I have no problem with that either. That's just creation ex deo, which is just creation ex materia.
Creation out of God.
Yes.
But there's no...
But it's still material. You're saying God's breath. No, but breath is material.
That's not creatio ex materia. You're changing... The traditional ex materia means physical substance.
I don't care about the tradition. So I understand that this is not a traditional view. That's why ex deo exists. I'm just saying it's unnecessary. If God is the kind of substance that can have breath, some kind of emanation from him, whatever that emanation is,
then that makes sense to you. Yeah.
Yes, that's something. That's not nothing.
Yeah. So in that case, that's where I said I can get on board with the creatio ex deo account, as long as the problem with the deo is it leads to pantheism. So you got to make sure once it's created, exactly. Once it's concretized, it's external to God. It's separate or independent of God. It's not a part of God or something.
And what I wrote in my blog is a perfectly good and acceptable explanation. If you are looking for a coherent explanation, Christians have to deny it because they have some presuppositions that pantheism can't be true. Yeah, but
it's still coherent. To deny pantheism, you just need to cut the tie, and then it's no longer a part of God. So once the breath goes out, if you want to say the breath, for example, I like that better than your mucus example, but it's separated from God. It isn't
God's flatulence. I mean, that's God. The universe.
Yeah. So you admit that is coherent. Yep. So yeah, that's
just
sort of
like my breath might be creating many universes with every word I speak right now.
Yeah, except it's not, because you don't have the potentiality nor the causal ability to.
How do you know how universes are made? In some quantum realm, my breath might be creating universes that, from the point of view of the intelligent people in it, has lasted for billions of years.
Well, here's why I know that's BS.
Let there be light.
Because the Bible tells me so. No human being can but
I don't care what the Bible says.
No, but this is your second objection, right? The Bible. This is your third and last objection is that the Bible doesn't teach it, and it does. It teaches only God bara, or creates in the ancient Hebrew. This is unique to God. Human beings don't do that. They can do creatio ex materia in terms of forming. I forget the Hebrew word, yaish, I think, or something. They can form certain things or make.
So let's get into that a little bit with the 15 minutes we got here. I just want to redeem as much of the time with interesting topics as possible. I expect these things to be taken up on the board, and I will have actually more time to write as I travel than I will to sit here and talk.
Gotcha. Well,
So
can I just make one last point on this, and then we can move on to conservation or providence, whatever you want to do?
yeah, because I actually want to talk about this point that you're making right now. Yeah, no. I'm not. I don't want to move on from it. The idea that only God can do original creation is not, in fact, an ancient view. I mean, that is an ancient view, but it's not the only ancient view. And throughout biblical times, there was this debate, and I actually think that the current view of creation ex nihilo is the later view, not the earlier view. And so in the original Genesis story, we do have things like the deep, which the ancient people thought of as a bad thing. And we have chaos in the void. These are not things that you speak of when you speak about God's work. God's work is to bring order to these things. So it's like it's almost as if the creation story is saying God is in his realm and he came to this other realm that was whacked and he unwhacked it. So that's I think a very popular way that these passages were viewed by ancient people, some ancient people, all the way up through to this day. And I don't think there's anything in the passage, and yeah, I've looked at the Hebrew words and Greek words and so forth. I don't think there's anything in there that requires you to think that this material was made by God. I think it actually makes more sense to say it was ordered. It was in a unordered state, and God ordered it, and that's what we see with things like creation and made. That's not to say that God couldn't have made the material, and then maybe someone came along, maybe there was a whole creation of humanity that sent it to hell in a handbasket, and God came and recreated it. But then that really wouldn't be a good way of saying in the beginning. So we get a sense that this beginning may be the beginning of our time period, but maybe from existing material that was not necessarily God's. He brought order out of chaos.
So I'll respond to that. So it's true in the ancient Near Eastern world there were these concepts, but it's not true, I would say, that this is what the Bible or certainly the author of the book of Genesis had in mind. So in the first place, I quoted Klaus Westermann, and entirely unique in the ancient Near Eastern world, verse 1 doesn't exist in the Egyptian myths, the Babylonian myths, and anywhere in the ancient Near East. This clause, the Hebrew idiom heavens and the earth, meaning all of creation, all of the universe, they didn't have one word to express that. So that's what heavens and the earth refers to, comes into being with this first verse, is bara, or created. That's entirely unique in the ancient Near East. And in terms of the waters, water represents chaos. Again, that's true in Egyptian creation myths and in Babylonian, in the Persian Gulf, the Babylonian myths. The Hebrews are entirely different. They do not mean chaos. So in the Egyptian myths and Babylonian myths, you get the waters are sort of an amorphous, unbounded reality with total, and that represents total anarchy, total chaos, out of which a main god comes and then produces order through some kind of sexual act or something like that. The Bible doesn't speak like that, actually.
But it still gives us words like
the waters are
darkness and void and formless.
Let me say this, because
I just want you to include this in your explanation. We have also darkness and formlessness and
yes, it's true.
So it's not.
So let me tell you what biblical scholars say about this text is that, look, the Bible, the waters in the Bible are bounded. First of all, they exist on the earth, and they're separated. There's order because there's air and winds and stuff like that. So the model that they have, Hebrews were very internal people or whatever, but some scholars say that at the time of the making of this creation, quote unquote, myth or creation account, they're envisioning total blackness out on the sea of the Mediterranean, where you're just on the ocean, an ordered state, the Mediterranean Sea, but there's no stars in the sky, that it's totally black. And this is an account. This is something that they experienced when they would travel on the sea at times. There's no light in the sky. So this is what they're actually referring to: an ordered Earth and out in the sea, no land, nothing like that, no stars, no lights in the heavens or anything like that. Just total blackness, and there's wind going, wind is blowing and stuff like that. So it's actually an ordered state. It's nothing like the state of chaos that the Egyptians have with this amorphous, unbounded, total anarchy. There's no ordered differentiations or states and stuff like that. So I would just beg to differ on your interpretation of what Genesis is saying there.
Well, and then you've got the earth that's full of water, and there's some dry land in there, but it's like a water sandwich with land being the meat. And God separates the waters from above from the waters from below, and so now we get to the dry land, and then he puts the hard dome there, and then this is not the world that the writer of Genesis 1 created was not an ordered world that just needed a little bit of dusting. It was an unformed mess that God had to do some massive rearranging to make habitable.
Yeah, that's just not. I gotta say, so many biblical scholars side with David, and because of the contextual background of the ancient Near East, where the Egyptian and Babylonian myths do teach this, but I'm saying that new biblical scholarship that don't just sort of assume this parallelomania are actually saying no, that the Hebrew account is radically different, and they're envisioning this night on the Mediterranean Sea, this dark black sky and that sort of thing out on a Mediterranean Sea, on an ordered earth. It's a bounded sea or waters. It's not totally unbounded like the primeval ocean of the Egyptians or something like that. So
what shape was the earth in this writer's imagination?
So the first chapter in Genesis doesn't tell us the shape.
It says it was formless.
Well, you're talking about the earth, not in terms of the planet, but the dry land and stuff like that, which God then brought about.
It said the world was formless and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep.
Yeah, it's talking about like the dry land was formless and that sort of thing. It's not talking about a planet. There are differentiations. Does the Bible say, look, the surface, the Holy Spirit was on the surface of the waters and the wind was blowing and stuff like that? It's there are differentiations of an ordered state. It's not just total chaos like the Egyptians or Babylonians have.
Yeah, it says, so God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, which I assume is the waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. I mean, this is the very first verse, and it's a description of what the author thought about the earth, and that doesn't sound anything like a mostly well-ordered planet, a nice lazy sail on the Mediterranean. That's not that.
Okay, so it's 10 o'clock. So, yeah, I'll let you have the last word. I've given sources. You can check out the scholarship for yourself on that. That's, put it this way, that's up for debate. And it's more recent scholarship is not just taking this lazy approach of just assuming the Bible is the Hebrews were copying Egyptian creation myths where there's an unbounded primeval sea that represents chaos.
I don't know where you get this accusation from. When I was a Christian, I never once considered the Egyptian myths. I only read the Bible as if it were the only book. And that's still the impression I got from it. I don't need the Egyptian myths for that. I just read the words.
Well, this idea of chaos and stuff, you didn't get that from the words of Genesis. You're getting this
Well,
from skeptic.
I've actually read my Bible. I've read the whole thing a few times, and you do get it from the Bible. You absolutely do get the fact that they were afraid of the waters, and that some of their worst demon gods were water gods, and drowning was a big deal back in those days. But no, water was for them a symbol of chaos. This wasn't just an Egyptian myth. You don't have to. You don't have to go there.
Water gods. The Hebrews believed in water gods. I'm not.
The Hebrews believed in all kinds of gods, but the idea that they're for instance, Leviathan was not Leviathan like a sea creature?
Yeah, that's not a god, though.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we could debate maybe Hebrew mythology a little bit. My point is, whatever you think about it, you don't have to reach to the Egyptians to get there. I didn't get any of this from Egyptian mythology.
Okay, cool.
And you seem to be accusing me of saying that we only get this if you pull it from Egyptian mythology, and that's just not the case.
And Babylonian. So yeah, that is where the scholars get it. In terms of the arguments you're making, that doesn't come from just reading Genesis. I don't believe you that you just read the Bible and came to these opinions. You are being influenced by scholarship.
Okay, well then maybe the biblical writers were influenced by the Egyptians and the Babylonians, but you don't have to go outside of the Bible to get these impressions.
I think you do. This notion of water as chaos, it doesn't come from the Bible directly. It requires some external knowledge of the surrounding socio-historical context, and that's where scholars usually get it. They assume that there is this influence from the dominant cultures onto the lesser dominant.
We just disagree. I can't tell you how many sermons of scholarly Christians who were not citing Hebrew and Babylonian myths about just things like the calming of the seas miracles by Jesus, and how the seas would have been a thing for those people that would have been a scary, almost intangible, monstrous type thing that couldn't be controlled. And one of the reasons that the miracle of Jesus calming the seas was such a big deal is because it was like Jesus taming an almost demonic element that could just eat people alive. When the seas are angry, it requires a god to calm it.
Yeah, that's reading something into. So that's reading something. Even with there's wind, there's order. The seas where Jesus calmed the Galilean Sea was an ordered state of creation. So yeah, thank you. You just proved my point. Interpreting the Bible as this literal sea on the earth and a dark sky and stuff like that. So that's great. That's an ordered state. So if that represents the creation thing, I agree.
Right over my head, I missed it. So that's fine.
Well, it's yeah. So is there any other? I'll let you have the last word on this issue. Again, I've given sources, detailed scholarly sources. You can learn the names and see the recent trends in scholarship and that to see who's right. And David still represents a significant portion of biblical scholarship. His what he's saying doesn't deserve to be dismissed. It's definitely plausible. So look at both sides and try to figure out yourself. I know, but are there any other topics like Providence or something like that you? Because I know you got to go at. What time do you have to go? 10:20 or?
Yeah, I've got a very short amount of time right now, but. Why don't you take 5 minutes on Providence, because that seems to be important to you.
Yeah, well, I figured it would be okay. So you're good. Conservation, God's relationship to a temporal universe. We don't need to get into. You're good.
I think that's just too much for this particular show. We can maybe talk about it in the
time thing.
Right, it's time. And also, I know that you're going to be doing other solo shows and some of this stuff. So,
one question though, just before I move on, pretend an A theory of time is true for creation. Do you think that would you agree with me that implies that God must be temporal as well? Or do you think God can be timeless and the creation temporal?
Okay. Let me navigate this carefully. I think the only way that God could be timeless is with the B theory of time.
I agree. Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree.
So I think that's all I dare say on that. So I actually think the B theory of time would be the Christian's best friend, and I'm not entirely sure why they reject it out of hand.
Okay, but yeah, well, you'll find out. Okay, yeah. So I guess I'll just, and to be fair to the other side, me and David agree. There are other people, Brian Leftow or Eleanor Stump and that sort of thing, Thomas Aquinas. There are different strategies to try and deny. People recognize this relational problem that I brought up, and there are strategies. So, what's it called? Eternal simultaneous relations, or Thomas Aquinas just denies that there are any real relations, or something like that. So there are strategies that you can look up from people like Brian Leftow or Eleanor Stump. I think they ultimately fail, so that's why I don't see that. They got to be matched. If an A theory of time is true, then God is temporal. If a B theory of time is true, then God is timeless, since we're timeless.
Yeah. But
yeah,
I think that we can get into, and if I had more time, I would love to take 30 minutes to argue middle knowledge being incompatible with an A theory of time. So so I think the A theory of time is bad for God on lots of fronts. So yeah, I would just say that if God knows the future, then in some way the future has already happened. That's a B theory of time. That's the only way he could know it.
Okay.
And so on an A theory of time, if he knows the future, then there's some kind of cheat going on. It's because the future hasn't happened, and since we have free will, we can do any damn thing we want to, and God can't know it. So once again, if he knows it and can plan for it, then it has happened and he has seen it, and you're talking about a B theory of time. Period.
Yeah, so that's your mistake. I do bring this up, right? Like you're assuming the only way God could come to know something is though he's like some kind of sports spectator, and he has to observe and see with his own eyes, so to speak.
Well, but I don't care if he observes it or sees it. If he knows it to be true, then it is true. The future is the future, whether you're looking at a slice of it or not. If God, in his Molinistic knowledge, knows that I am going to eat a slice of pizza today for lunch, there's not a damn thing I can do to change that. I am going to eat a slice of pizza today for lunch. That piece of time is set in stone. That is the B theory of time.
But it's not. So you're talking about free knowledge, not middle knowledge, because middle knowledge comes before he creates in the first place, right? He just knows, and this incorporates your free will. So he knows what in advance you will choose to do or not to do. That doesn't determine, and that's the problematic aspect, what you will or will not do. God's knowledge of what you will do is determined by your choice. So God is
okay, but you're just throwing choice in there as just another element, and I don't really think of that as much of an element. So that's just another element in the pudding here. But God knows what it is, and it's still set in stone. So I don't actually care whether you say I had choice or not. The fact is, once you say God knows it, it is set in stone.
Right, it's set in stone at the level of free knowledge, right? His free knowledge, once he makes his decree and chooses what world to create, what possible world to create, or what feasible world to create, then it's going to go exactly the way he knows it will. That doesn't. You still have free will is part and parcel of this entire package. So it's not a problem. It's not a problem for me.
I can't change it, so it's still B theory. So, I mean, just saying the words free will and you have free will doesn't
It's
matter.
not B
I've got
theory
free
because
will in the B theory, too.
no, but it's not B theory, because B theory is that the entire time stream exists.
It
right?
does.
And
Right.
no, but an A theory of time, which we're assuming to be true, doesn't say this.
It does not matter to me whether you say it's the A theory of time and so it happens linearly, as opposed to B theory of time, it all happens. Because at the end of the day, it all happens. So the A theory is just maybe a slower way of constructing this time stream. But if you've got someone who can look across it and see what's going to happen, then that's indistinguishable from a slice of B theory.
But he doesn't look across it because it doesn't exist in the first place. So like you just, I don't think you understand what the B and A theory of time are totally. But again, it doesn't matter. Yes, in terms of your...
I assure you, I understand what the A and B theory of time are.
Okay, so maybe just the way you said it in your haste.
Yes,
anyways.
it could very well be that I said it sloppily, but I assure you I know what the theories are. There's even a C theory that is not worth going into right now, but there are lots of theories of time.
What is the C
I don't think that I... Let's not do it. But here's the thing.
Well,
I don't think... I could probably provide you a link.
Okay, so...
I don't think, though, that it helps the God theory. I think the best theory of time for the mainstream Christian God is the B theory. And yes, you have to give up a few things, and you'll come a lot closer to Calvinism with the B theory. But I think that's the most coherent way to go if you're trying to come up with sensible theories of how God operates in time.
Okay. So we'll get into that when we go through the time show in great detail. But your main point is about God's providence, and once God creates, this is why God has his sovereignty, and he will accomplish his will regardless. God has his end goal. Once he creates, he gains free knowledge, and he knows exactly what will happen, including what each of us will freely choose to do given those specific circumstances and that we're privy to. But the thing that becomes problematic for us being free or not is the fact that, am I determined by these extrinsic or external circumstances, or am I going sovereignly decreed to do this action by my own internal free will? And that's the aspect that's important. So compatibilists will agree with me, and like Val, he'll agree with me and say, well, as long as there's no extrinsic or external determining causes, like the fact that God created a world where there's a blue pen in my hand doesn't cause me to do something, but it doesn't cause me to say hello, to choose to do that. But there are internal factors. So for Val, those internal factors would be my beliefs, my desires, my thoughts, or something like that. And these determine me to say hello because I've got a blue pen in my hand or something like that. I say no. That's still determinism. That's still bad. The only internal state that choice is my free will as a free will agent, and I'm a prime mover. I've got a blue pen in my hand. That caused me to say hello, and I chose that. That causes me to make a free will choice, and it's the free will internal component that causes that action.
Right, but none of us are completely free, and so that's the
true.
thing. And I think that I would have to say we're not. I think to be perfectly consistent, I think I have to say we're not at all free. But at the very least, to speak as a compatibilist like a Daniel Dennett, we're certainly not completely free. And so, just to provide an example, if you find yourself in a burning building that you did not set alight, your free will doesn't matter. What you are going to do is try to get out. You're going to try to get out. I don't know the various ways you're going to try to get out. That really depends on where the fire is, what obstacles there are in the room. There are certain avenues that are cut off to you. So, for instance, you're not going to try to get out by walking through walls. That option's not there for you. You may not try to get out by going through the front door because there may be a blaze on the other side of the front door. So you're not completely free in what you're going to do from moment to moment. That fire was external to you, and that forces a set of choices. And with each choice you make, there's a limited number of choices you have in front of you. So. Your route that you take to get out of a fire, you can say you've got free will, but you don't completely have free will.
Yeah, and that's entirely correct. This is where God's sovereignty of the Molinism aspect comes in, right? Because God creates those external circumstances, and those provide influences on our free will.
That is the thing that I would say, that I think most skeptics would say is reprehensible about the God character, because you can say, well, he leaves us with free will, but he also puts us in burning buildings where we only have one route to get out.
Okay, so I've only got 4 minutes to do this. Then, if my clock's fast, but okay, so
because we're experiencing time differently. But we're not talking about time. Never mind.
Okay, so I got to say this. So influences do not determine our free will choices. They only influence our free choices. So it's not a problem. I don't care. Further, David's also right that our free will is constrained. I don't make a free will choice for my heart to beat. It's determined to do that through natural law. I don't make a free will choice. Actually, I can make a free will choice to breathe or not, but I can choose to hold my breath. But normally, when I'm just not thinking about it, I'm just breathing. It's a determined action. I'm not choosing to breathe. So there are constraints and there are external influences, and it's the external influences that and the constraints that is God's part in his sovereignty. He chooses to create a world in which those influences are present, and he knows in advance that given those influences, I will freely choose to say yes or say no, or to do this or to do that. And I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem with God, quote unquote, predestining the universe for a certain end. That's great. I affirm that. The Bible says that. That's where the Calvinists come in, and that's where I believe in a strong notion of God's sovereignty. But at the same time, I don't deny libertarian free will, and that's what makes God off the hook for my sins. And I'm responsible for that because I chose, regardless of the influences or whatever, I'm responsible to not sin. And if I choose to sin, regardless of how much pressure I'm on, I'm bankrupt, I'm starving to death or something like that. Actually, stealing is not a good thing because the Bible allows stealing when you're starving. Did you know that? In the Old Testament, for example.
No.
In the Old Testament, you're allowed to take for sustenance purposes. You can take from people's land to eat, and that's not
stealing. That was written into the gleaning laws. So you might want to go back and start that chapter again. There's a provision for gleaning. Is a little bit like welfare. That it is not stealing. Stealing would be if you were to go further into those fields and take some of the crops that were not specifically set aside for gleaning.
That's semantics again. Fair enough, but I'm saying so lying.
I have read the Bible a few times.
Great. So lying. I can experience extreme pressure to lie to save my own butt in a certain circumstance or something like that. But I choose to do that or not. It's the influences don't determine that choice. So I'm free to say no. Whatever happens,
if God is shoving you in a bunch of untenable circumstances and influencing you to do the wrong thing. Let's call it temptation toward evil. And he knows what your proclivities and weaknesses are, but he says, "Well, I didn't make you do it." Well, that's bullshit. Or excuse me, that's BSC. Is what that is. But that's batshit crazy. Come on.
Because we're never tempted beyond our ability to say no. The Bible also says that, right? So in terms of God's temptation, again, that's God applying external influences, however strong they may be. They're always not beyond our control to say yes or no.
Maybe worth talking about. Look, let me just make my closing point. I don't actually care who gets the last word on this one.
Sure.
Here, the only thing that I would say, I would just skip to the end of my own write-up here, and say Laplace. I'm done.
Okay.
Did you need that unpacked more? So
I'm assuming I know the quote that you're
yes.
going for, but
yes. So we simply, despite everything that you have written in your post, at least the parts that I could understand, I will admit to getting lost in your post. Maybe it'll get unpacked during the comments, but I would say there is still no need for the God hypothesis. So we still have everything we need for a perfectly material, perfectly secular point of view of the origins. We don't need a point of view of origins. We can say, I don't know. I don't know is good, people. It's fine. It works. You don't have to rush it. It might take another 100, 200, 500 years to come up with a good explanation. You won't be around for that. That's okay. Don't let your existential angst force you to rush into an explanation that's just not true. I don't know is fine, but even if you want to take one of the existing explanations, we have no need for the God hypothesis there. And you can grab a God hypothesis. You can even say it's coherent. I don't think it is. But it's just not necessary. So we don't have to go there, and I don't have to really rigorously fight this particular battle more than I've done already. So I'm perfectly happy to leave it there.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. It's a short show. Next week's going to be a very long one, and it's something that both David and I think is, if not the most, it's definitely one of the most important topics that we will address in the entire series.
You will not get any apathy from me next week, I promise. This has always been one of the key issues for me, one of the most fun issues for me on either side of the Christian aisle. I think one of the most consequential issues. People can gain or lose faith over next week's topic. It's worldview shifting stuff, and it's the kind of stuff that matters to me. And I can also say, regardless of what Dale brings you, I don't know what he's going to bring you because he's not going to necessarily respond to me. I'm not going to be concerned with the highbrowed ivory tower kind of theology on this. And I'm a kind of a theology wonk, and I will have a theology piece, but this is actually boots on the ground, what real people think and how they live their lives. And so it's going to be fun. We're going to have some guests. I haven't even lined up all of the guests, but we're going to have some guests. There will be no more than, let me just finish this, there will be no more than 3 people on the mic at the same time. So we will have guests coming in and out of the podcast. It'll be full featured. The blogs will be long. Sit back, enjoy. It's going to be fantastic.
Do you know who are the guests, first of all? Or is it a mystery, or?
Well, it's a mystery only in that I don't have contracts signed in blood yet. And
Gotcha.
At least one of the guests I haven't asked yet.
Okay.
But I think they will say yes. So. And
what's the topic? I don't think we mentioned what the topic's going to be.
Well, it's going to be miracles. It's going to be but it won't be like the miracle discussion we had a couple of weeks ago. You can think of that as the precursor. I don't actually plan to cover any of that ground.
Same here. Yeah.
So.
In fact, I'm going to be arguing that entire ground was totally meaningless and irrelevant to the issue of miracles. That's not true. Not meaningless and that sort of thing. But making this distinction between supernatural versus natural, you guys are off base. So I think I'm going to be providing something that's unique. In the words of this is my plan for next week. In the words of
I just lost you. Okay, so I don't know if
you didn't hear. Oh, you didn't hear that?
No, he just went out.
Son of a gun. Okay, well, I had.
Were you trying to be cute?
I was. I had the video set up to the moment of Gladiator where he's like, I will win the crowd. I will give the people something they've never seen before.
Okay, well, I think that you nailed it. Although I don't know why Darth Vader is in Gladiator all of a sudden, but...
That was my Russell Crowe.
Yeah, well, that's Russell Crowe playing Darth Vader, playing Gladiator.
I set up the video to the perfect moment, exact moment where he says that, all in preparation for that joke, and it doesn't work.
Oh no, I think it was better.
Okay.
So the topic of my blog, I had to pull up the word files. Miracles. The most overpromised and underdelivered Christian claim.
I think you're going to be impressed with what I come up with. It'll definitely be something you've never encountered before. So,
and I think you'll be impressed with what I come up with.
Well, I've already seen it.
Yeah.
Unless you got new stuff.
No, you've seen the write-up. I promise. I don't plan to do any more writing. That's enough. And even then. It should challenge you enough. You can. If I were you, I would take the strategy of simply ignoring everything that I wrote and making your own case. Yeah. So that's your only strategy. Only thing is that's not really going to work on the show. This is going to be one of those shows. What did Tyler want to rename the show?
Forgot. It was something on the spectrum.
No, it was. Dale.
Oh, David Pummel's
David,
Dale.
Yeah, DP.
Yeah.
DPDA. It'll be another episode of DPDA. Look, and I'm prepared for that. I'm actually going to treat this topic respectfully. This is not just going to be a simple polemic fest from me, because I do take this. This is actually one of the few quote unquote Christian topics that I take seriously. So I plan to take it seriously.
Yeah, and this is something, out of every this is the topic I've spent the most time researching. This is the product of about a decade of my research. I have what I believe is a unique contribution in terms of how we identify miracles. So, yeah, I hope I think it'll come together, and hopefully I've covered all the bases, condensing 10 years of research off and on down into a single blog or a single 4-hour conversation is a bit much, but I
think of this show as your Christmas present, people, audience. So we're not going to have
And just so the audience knows, so I'm going to try to, when I get my thing finished, I'm going to do a solo show, because in what David's got planned, it's going to be more of a Guerrilla Christian thing, and I'm not going to have enough time to lay out my case properly.
Actually, in one of the segments, I might actually mute your mic, so it won't all be Guerrilla Christian. I'll be looking at a lot of different aspects of it, because there's one person that I plan to bring on an interview that it wouldn't be a back and forth between you and them.
Okay. Yeah, it's your show, your whatever you want to do. I'm there for you.
It's gonna be long. Don't worry, you'll have your say. You're not gonna be. It's not gonna he muted my mic. I didn't get to make my point. You're gonna have 4 hours to make your point.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of my opening case, I want to give it as a solo show, because it'll probably be like an hour or something like that. So rather than waste time from what you've got planned, I'll give that for people to consider, and then we can get straight into whatever you want to do. And I'm ready, up for the challenge.
Yeah. The other thing about this show, folks, since it's going to be long and technical babble, blah blah blah, it's going to be split up into 2 parts. So I will land both parts on the blog, but just we've had to do this before. There will be a part 1 and a part 2 that you'll have to listen to separately. I have to do that for these super long shows, and this is just going to be one of them. So, with that in mind, the ebook link will be in the show notes. If it's not in the show notes right now, which I know it's not, I'll have Dale edit that link in the show notes in our current blog, so that you can download the ebook. When Dale finishes his, I will be glad to ebook-alate it and put a link for that too. And if you missed the links that I'm talking about and it's not in the show notes, you can just ask me for it, and I'll make sure that you get it. And I want to say thank you to all of the people who have already downloaded and began reading that. I know exactly how many of you there are. That is very gratifying. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week. Miracles.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.